So we do these meetings every couple of months. The idea is to look at really practical things that are going on in AI based around real experiences, case studies, and so on. Grounded AI, just briefly, we are a partly Cambridge-based startup. We have a product called Verify, which does citation checking in academic publishing. Essentially, the idea is any claim that's made in an academic paper, we check using LLMs. We've got pilots up and running, so if anyone is interested in that, come and have a chat after this meeting, or go to that URL and have a look. Our co-organisers today are Robert Walters and Daniel Bone. We'll talk a little bit about Robert Walters. So thanks very much, Daniel.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me at the back? Yes? Good. Perfect. Yes, as Mark said, my name's Daniel Bone, the co-organiser of Cambridge AI. First and foremost, haven't seen everybody, so Happy New Year. Hope you all had a good Christmas, and thank you for coming out tonight. A little bit about myself. I'm not going to bore you too much with it. I'm a data and AI recruiter, recruiting across Cambridge, do a little bit in Oxford and London, but I mainly focus on the Cambridge area. So if you're looking for a job, if you just want to have a chat, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. In terms of Robert Walters, we don't just do tech, we do finance, we do legal, we do supply chain, HR. You name it, we probably will do it. So again, if you've got any other questions, feel free to pop myself a message or grab me afterwards. My colleague Tom just stood over there with the glasses. He can also help you out as well. And in terms of what we've got coming up this year, obviously loads of Cambridge AI events, and also a number of sort of leadership roundtables, whether that's sort of industry specific or not. So if you're interested in attending any of those or want to discuss, please do just grab me afterwards. I'm now going to pass over to Adam from Fora, who's going to do a quick little intro and give you a little bit further information.
Thank you. It's weird with the microphone that's not actually functioning. We'll see in the recording. Very quickly from me, it was a thank you on behalf of Fora. I don't know if anyone in the room is with Fora or based in the building. They were certainly invited. I think we saw a couple of names on the list, but I'm not sure if they made it up here. A bit about us. We are a co-working business. There are about 70 locations in total. This is our only location in Cambridge, but it's a good one. And then we have 5 buildings in King's Cross as well. So for anyone who's doing, certainly in your world and your sector, doing that 40-minute train, Great Northern service back into King's Cross and back here, our platform is a good blueprint for you to sort of slide into. We do everything from big offices. So in this building, we've got half a floor. Actually, the rest of this floor is for Luminance, so a darling AI company based here and started here in Cambridge. Right the way through to Cusp AI, who's another startup, just raised 30 million, and everything in between. So from one-man band starting out right the way up to proper capitalized businesses. Our companies or companies within our buildings can then access all of the buildings within the network, which they find really helpful. We have meeting rooms, we have lounge space, and as a sort of thanks for coming tonight, in the follow-up, I think tomorrow an email is going to go out and we'll be offering a complimentary day pass for everyone who's here, and in fact I think everyone in the network as well. You can do that in Cambridge, you can do that in King's Cross. Just follow the link tomorrow, and meeting rooms and all of that stuff as well. So thank you for coming. That's the pitch. You can get on with your brilliant presentation. Thank you. Over to Mark.
Thanks so much, Adam, and thanks again to Fora for hosting it. It's a really wonderful space. So thanks very much for the speakers tonight. The first of those is Jonathan Rigby. Jonathan, I just got some things written down here. Jonathan is a senior engineering leader with 25 years in the software business and over 15 as a manager and leader of teams. Recently, he's worked for Qatalog, which is a GenAI company that provides GPT for your business by connecting you to your information repositories and allowing you to query them using natural language. Outside of work, as we've just been discussing, he's a keen cold water swimmer, as am I, and fan of country music. So Jonathan, take it away. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark. I guess I need the next slide just to sort of introduce my sort of topic. And so I'm going to be speaking tonight. I think tonight's going to be, I think for both myself and Vikas, there's going to be quite a practical session. So for those who are expecting a real technical deep dive into generative AI, I'm sorry, that's probably not for you tonight. But I hope there will be something for everyone, because my topic is, how do I use GenAI to manage my software team? So it's obviously speaking about me and my experience as a software engineering leader and how I've used GenAI. But you know, it's not, if you're not a software engineering leader here tonight, don't worry. If you're a manager of people or a leader of people, or you hire or you document or you do anything like that, you'll see from the specific use cases that I'm going to be focusing on that there is some take home for you, I hope, from what I'm going to be talking around. So can we have the next slide? So before I get into what it is and the types of things that I want to speak about, I just want to talk about what it isn't. So first of all, and I realise that this is quite sort of small, and the purpose is not for you to sort of read it. So if anybody's straining, I'm just going to read it out. But essentially what I've got on here is a sort of manager chatbot. So if you can imagine, and I'll read out what it is. So the manager on the left-hand side is saying, "Hi, how are you today? How is the family?" The report says, "Oh, good, thanks." And then the manager, "I was wanting to check in on your quarterly objectives. Can you bring in updates? Blah, blah, blah. The AWS migration is on track. I'm working on the handover, but I wanted to take some days off next week. Okay, which days do you want to take off?" And you can see this backwards and forwards. This is not what I'm talking about. This is not AI for managers. It's not replacing AI managers with AI, which is good, because otherwise my talk would be rather like turkeys voting for Christmas. So let's grab the next slide, please. I just wanted to, before we dive into it, just wanted to give you just a flavour of how I've sort of seen in sort of my research of how managers have used generative AI to try to sort of manage their teams. So one manager decided to write motivational emails to his team using ChatGPT, and this is the output that he got. "Team, you're so awesome that if we were building the Tower of Babel, we'd reach the moon, not just the heavens." Another manager, during a debate between two of his engineers to decide what approach to take, fed both of the arguments into ChatGPT. ChatGPT spoke and came out with, "It seems like they're both right. Let's create a hybrid solution that costs twice as much and takes 3 times as long." And the third example is when a manager used AI to write references for one of his sort of team, taking him on board the feedback. "John, your contributions this quarter were like a spice rack, full of potential, but occasionally overwhelming." So the point here is that, yeah, these are whimsical examples of how people have used ChatGPT, used generative AI to try to sort of augment their role as managers. Can we have the next slide? But of course, that's the negative. And I think I wouldn't be up here speaking about it if I didn't feel that there were some positives to this. And there are, I feel, a lot of largely untapped potential, particularly for managers, because that's my perspective. So I came across this, which is the Harvard Business Review. They did a guide to generative AI last year, and they found out that only 15% of managers are actually using generative AI in any capacity in their work. And of course, you know, a lot of my engineers are using generative AI, using GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT in their coding. And why shouldn't managers? Because I think what you'll see is that there are some strong use cases for managers to use sort of ChatGPT in running their software teams. And I don't know about the sort of second quote, how it feels quite bombastic in terms of how it's describing the technology and what advantage you might get. But my own personal experience is that it does help, and it can help me to manage my team. And I'm going to come on to sort of talk about some of this, and particularly thinking about different areas. So this is what I've got here is just a list of roles and responsibilities that a manager might have. I've just sort of listed. And if you look down that, it's probably not obvious or apparent where you might use sort of generative AI in some of those. A lot of them are quite people-centric and people sort of focused. But if we have the next slide, what I've done is I've sort of shaded, you probably can't see this sort of shading, but I've put on for some of these where, I mean, the dark shading is where I think generative AI can have a major impact and influence on that part of your role. And the other sort of slightly sort of greyish shading on that screen is where I think it can have an impact in some of that area. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a sort of deep dive into 4 of these different areas and look about where I think it can help. Now, the first area I'm going to talk about is documentation. Now, unfortunately, documentation is a reality for a lot of us. It was certainly a reality for me as an engineering manager. And one of the things that I've had to do, and I've realized that ChatGPT can help with, is around the idea of creating policy documentation. I mean, your business, you may have some sort of policy that you have to write on a regular basis. Now, this is the old way of doing it. This is me searching for a sort of template to use. So it's an ISO 27001. That doesn't really matter, but I'm looking for something to base it on. Of course, before Google, we'd start from a blank sheet of paper and it would feel like very much we're reinventing the wheel. So I'm searching through, trying to find out some examples. You can see I'm not getting very far with it. I'm looking for potentially for an image that I could sort of like use and then amend to sort of be able to sort of do for my own particular play. I'm not getting a great deal of success. I'm going from website to website. The first one I actually came across, there was a template, but I was going to have to pay for it. I was like, well, okay. So the alternative is, well, let's do the same again, but let's put it into, so if we can have the next slide, let's put it into ChatGPT. And what I'm doing is that the prompt is on the right-hand side, is that I want you to create me an out-of-hour policy that adheres to the ISO 27001 standard. But what I'm then also doing is I'm augmenting it with specifics that are related to my out-of-hour policy. So in this case, it's specific SLAs. Now, actually, what you can see is that ChatGPT is creating something that is quite nice, looks like a policy statement. It's set out quite nicely. It's got definitions. It also incorporates the elements that are specific to me, and you'll see that it creates something that is, and I appreciate probably people at the back probably can't see it, but trust me, it's creating a nice sort of policy document, and it's something that you can sort of then amend. So I can then go into the prompt and amend it and say, actually I need something else, and it will go and it will recreate that. And sure, it's not something that you would just blindly do and then send off, but it's a really good starting point, and it puts it in the format that you want, and it cuts out a lot of, and I had to do a lot of ISO accreditation policies last year, and ChatGPT was a really big help for me in this particular space. The second area I want to look at is the area of hiring. Now, I don't know, certainly in software engineering, or I imagine in other organizations and roles, we'll have something like this, a couple of documents. What I've got is I've got a competency framework on the left. So that just basically talks about the different levels that I've got within my engineering team and what is expected of those levels in terms of different parts of the your role. And on the right-hand side is a job description. And actually, you could use ChatGPT to create one from the other. But in this case, these are historical documents. I had them. And what I've done is, if we can go to the next slide, I've used a prompt where I've said, okay, generative AI, I take these documents that I've got and create me a set of interview questions that can help me to determine whether, in this case, it's a staff engineer has got the competencies that I need for that role. And what you'll see is that it's taking those two documents, it starts to create me a set of questions within that area, and that's something that I can then use in interviews. As well as that, for hiring, I've seen use cases for being able to outreach to potential sort of candidates. So, have the ability to specifically tailor your outreach mail. And this is maybe one for the recruiters out there, sort of Oliver Walters and co. Because I don't know about you, I don't know if you've had those LinkedIn outreach emails where you've got specific templated emails where it says, "Dear first name, last name." I actually got one the other year that said, "I've got a really great head of engineering that I think would be really good for your business." I was actually the head of engineering at that time, so didn't particularly go down well to me. But the idea is that you can curate these type of outreach emails, again, using ChatGPT, using generative AI. I haven't used it in terms of basically sifting through CVs. That's a bit of a contentious issue, whether people are using generative AI to be able to sort of scan for specific stuff and to be able to do that. But another way of which you can use it within the hiring sort of stream is to be able to record interviews, to be able to take notes, allow you to focus in on the candidate rather than scribbling notes at the sort of same time. That's a really good use case. I actually had an interview with an AI company a few months ago, and they said, "Oh, I hope you don't mind. We're using a generative AI tool to take notes through the through the interview." They did actually add at the bottom, "Well, if you are, maybe you should consider not joining us if you're bothered about it." So I was fine with it, but I'm in the space, so I know. My third example is I've just called summarization, which is just a way of just obviously summarizing information. Now, me as a manager, I've got a lot of information that I need to keep across. What are my teams doing? What's going on in different areas of the business? So I need to consume a lot of information, and it can be really sort of challenging. And I think one of the strong use cases for generative AI is that ability to summarize large parts of information and to distill it down into sort of certain areas so that you can get that. Now, what I've got here is just examples that are embedded into sort of software that we know and love. So on the left-hand side, that's Jira, and Jira's AI has got the ability to take a project, to create a summary report pretty much straight off the bat, talking about the different statuses of pieces of development that are in process. On the right-hand side is Slack. And this was one of my hoped for features when Slack AI developed it, which is the ability to summarize, and particularly to summarize threads. I don't know if you're users of Slacks and you come to a situation, there's been somebody's posted something in a channel and there've been 100 plus replies before you've even had chance. You've been in a meeting and you come onto it and it's something that's really important to you. And you've got something to say, but what do? Do you immediately go on and post that? It might have been discussed. There might have been something that has countered that but to read 100 replies, well, that's a real pain. So the fact that Slack AI can then summarize that and bring you up to speed quite quickly really reduces a lot of time. We have the next slide. And then in a similar sort of vein, we've talked about it already before, like meeting tools have also got the ability to summarize either what's gone on in the meeting so far. So I like this particular feature. So you can, on the left-hand side, you've got a summary of what's gone on so far in this meeting. So you've joined the meeting late and you don't have that situation where the people in the meeting say, "Oh, Bob's just joined. Well, for the last 10 minutes we've been discussing," and then spend another 10 minutes bringing Bob up to speed when Bob can just read the summary of the meeting so far using AI's summary tool. And on the right-hand side is another type of meeting summary tool. Okay, my final sort of area of that I think is really strong, and this is onboarding or training. So I often have situations where I've got an engineer who's joined this sort of team, senior engineer. I want them to get up to speed pretty quickly. Onboarding engineers takes a long time, and the challenge is to sort of get them productive as soon as possible. Now, what I've done here is I've used the prompt to sort of ask the generative AI to act as a trainer, and I'm going to give it some information. And what I want it to do is to train my new onboarding employee. And so actually what this particular case is doing is I've given it a document that is 50 pages long. It contains the architecture of my system. And what I want to do is I want my new employee, my new engineer to be able to get up to speed pretty quickly with that. And what it does is it acts as a trainer. It asks you questions. It leads you down towards the right answer. If you get the right answer, if you understand that part of the business, it moves on. So again, I think this is quite a nice use case for it. And I've used it for myself for trying to upskill or to sort of learn specific new things. If we move to the next slide. There's lots of possibilities out there. And I think I've just put a few on there, but I think the reality is that GenAI is a great tool. Deciding what we were talking about in the beginning, where it was like, okay, you've got to find the right use case for it. I think we're starting to sort of know that's the reality. Don't let the tail wag the dog. Don't just think, oh, I've got to use this technology because it's new and it's funky. And there is that danger, and I've seen it in the last 18 months. People have said, oh, this is the technology we need to use. How do we get it into our product? And I think one of the key lessons I've learned is, make sure that the use case is strong. I think that the use cases I've showed so far are strong use cases, but don't just sort of put it or try and sort of do it in any case. Next slide. And why is all this important? Well, I speak as a manager in this situation, and like any new sort of technology, when you're using it, I think all advent of technology is being able to sort of help us automate or to do something in areas that are more mundane, repetitive, that type of thing. And GenAI is like that. So those policy documents that I referred to, it was a sort of mundane, repetitive part of my job. And by having ChatGPT help me with that, enabled me then to be able to spend time as an engineering leader focusing on stuff that's going to really make a difference to my business and my team. And that is doing things like setting engineering culture, creating a good engineering strategy, communicating messages to people in a clear way, rather than going away and doing some of those more sort of repetitive tasks. So it's freed me up, and I've found that that's been a real help for me to really focus on the stuff that makes a difference. And the next slide. So I've just put this at the end, and it's a big sort of question mark. Well, what does that mean for the future? I joked at the beginning about the manager chatbot and whether I would be replaced by a chatbot in future. I don't know how those maybe those who don't get on too well with their manager would probably prefer a manager chatbot and interacting with your manager in that way. But I think the reality is that actually, there are. If I think about the role of a sort of an engineering manager or indeed an engineer, there are lots of different facets to your job. And whilst generative AI is going to make a big impact, I don't think it's going to replace anybody's jobs certainly sort of in the medium term. Where I would sort of have a slight sort of question mark is and I don't know if anybody's in this and you can argue this with me, I think some of the things that we've shown that it is strong at, I would be sort of slightly more concerned if I was in areas of project management or Scrum Master or something like that. I think there is quite a lot of strength and overlap in those areas, but that's not to say it means that that's going to replace you. It just means that you've got to evolve with it and embrace it. And that's what I would say to anybody who's like a bit concerned about sort of generative AI. I think if you embrace it, then it frees you up to be able to sort of do other things. And I think that's where it's going to be something that you can actually do rather than sit back and worry about it and almost like blanket and say, I don't want to do it because of that. That's everything I think for me. Do you want to just do to the next slide?
Yeah.
You can connect with me if you like, and we can carry on the conversation. We could carry on the conversation tonight. I guess any questions?
I'm just curious because I think you talked about summarization. I mean, of course, there's a big thing about hallucination with the LLMs and all of that, right? So just curious to know your experience with, I have had my experience as well, but I'm very curious to know what your experience has been with the hallucination and summarization part.
Pass it back. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, obviously hallucination is a concern, and that's put people off, and it very much is a reality. I think models have improved even over the short time that they've existed. I think the use cases that I've shown there are slightly different because actually what you're doing is that you're putting data into it and it's summarizing it from that, rather than it being tell me everything about X, which it's sort of taken from its crawl of the web and training its model from the web. So I think that means my experience is that means it's significantly better. And so actually what you get as a summary is actually reflective of what you've put into it. I don't know if other people would like to sort of talk about their experience.
Exactly right, because if you put a lot of context in there, it doesn't have to rely on the underlying training, so it's unlikely to hallucinate.
Yeah. Another question?
Yeah, Mark, just relay it, would you? Can you just talk about the architecture compromises, the challenges that you had as one of the examples? I thought it was really interesting. What on earth did you load into ChatGPT?
Which example?
The architecture one. You've got architecture compromises.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. What was my prompt on that? What did I put in? Yeah. So this was, I suppose it was trying to sort of get a sense of like, well, these are two different ways that we could architect our system. What are the strengths and weaknesses about it? And I was a bit sort of suspect of whether I'd get anything sort of valuable from that, but it was a really good. I'm not an architect, but I've worked with engineers for a long time. I understand sort of the fundamentals, and I actually felt it showed the sort of trade-offs pretty well. I didn't feed into it an architectural diagram and ask it to critique it, but I sort of described it in a sense, and it was like, okay, what do you think of these two alternatives? And what gives you what as a starting point, what you'd want, and it sort of points out the pros and cons of both approaches. And then you've then actually got to make that decision. It's not going to make it for you, obviously.
One more? Or maybe a couple?
Hi, I'm Sasha from UnderstandAI.today. Who is paying for your GPT tokens? So the question is about the cost of AI, in the sense that, that's a real question, who's paying for your GPT tokens, and how does that compare in terms of your hourly rate to write emails and do the recruitment job?
Actually, I tell you what, hold on, because we'll take another question as well, then you can answer both at once.
So I'm kind of curious. Most of the companies that I've heard about that aren't using generative AI aren't doing so because of IP reasons. So I'm wondering how you've navigated that particular part of the equation.
So two questions: one about who's buying the tokens, and the other about issues to do with IP protection.
Yeah, fine. Well, I'm pretty expensive, so you'd have to sort of have a lot of ChatGPT tokens to sort of to make up for my equivalent hourly rate for writing those documents. No, but to be serious, I think that is a factor, and obviously feeding a lot of information in there, then you're potentially sort of like using it. But my experience is that the price and the tokens and what you can put into the models as even in the short space of time, I guess it's because of the race between all the different providers, has reduced sort of dramatically. It was a really important factor. I talked about the business that I worked at. That was a really important factor for us, because what we did was ChatGPT for your business. So we took everybody's information and people could ask a question on that. And so we were sending a lot of information off, and we were struggling with rate limits, we were struggling with token length and that type of thing. But in the 6 to 8 months that we developed our product, actually some of the problems that we were having to work around got solved. So I think tokens are always going to be, and token length and is going to be a problem, but I think actually it's getting better and better with time. That's sort of my experience. The question about IP, so I mean, in those situations, I mean, obviously it's for individuals and their companies to sort of determine sharing that information with models and how they sort of feel about that. I think actually some models that you use, you pay more and they don't use it to train their models. But yeah, the point is, well, is that information, and the ones that I sort of shared, weren't anything that were particular. But if your company is, your IP is a key thing, and adding that to sort of model is going to compromise it, then yeah, that's going to be a problem. I don't know if that was your question, but that's how I've interpreted it, at least. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call a halt there. We can follow up in the bar afterwards. So thanks very much, Jonathan. Very, very great talk. So our next speaker is Vikas Goel, and a few words about Vikas. Vikas is a transformation executive who's been at the intersection of business and technology since the early 2000s. He's been at the forefront of technology with AI. Currently, his core focus specializing in driving AI adoption and transformation. Formerly, he was with Huawei on mobile and One Advanced, and he's an Oxford AI graduate and thought leader. So take it away, Vikas.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mark, and I want to use this. Right, so good evening, everyone. So today, focus of my talk is really about how do we really take that hype that AI has created around us to real business impact. And I think I'll take the lead from Jonathan, your talk. It's a very practical presentation here, less of technology, but I can answer some of your questions. I'll try my best. If not, of course, we'll have other discussions where I can answer those. Well, this is my favorite quote. The AI that we have access to today is the worst it'll ever be. Now, what does it mean? I'm seeing it from the lens of a business leader. For a business leader, it's a very profound statement because I have to make decisions. Should I invest in AI today? Should I wait for some more time to invest? How much is going to change? Exponentially? A little bit? It is stagnating? That's the kind of question leaders are asking today. And people like me and others who are kind of learning AI and also have some practical experience in AI, we help businesses to get the answers to such questions. So I'm an AI transformation leader, as Mark just said, co-founder of an AI SEO firm. If anyone wants to talk about this, I'll be happy to talk about it during sessions. I'm also a partner at a consulting firm, Oxford AI student, and also an advisor to a few startups in AI space. So let's talk about this AI hype. AI is a new general purpose technology. I think we have heard this, but let's look at it from business sense. It's almost as good as it's an electricity which is introduced in the industrial world. Any business today, if they do run well, run efficiently, they have to get AI involved. Now the question comes to this is, fine, let me get AI into my business. Let me streamline my operations. What is someone still going to buy my business or whatever I'm producing with AI or not? That's the question, because AI is like an engine to a car which supercharges the car. Nobody wants to buy the engine. Everybody wants to buy the car. Likewise, nobody wants to buy a business today. When I say business, means a product from a business, unless it is powered by AI. But the difference that business leader has to understand is that if I'm a CIO and I say, hey, I'm going to do this shiny AI use case, nobody's going to buy that use case unless it is aligned with your business strategy. And that's the thing that we're going to unpack today. I'm going to show you a practical use case and a case study where we applied all of these concepts to really make a business impact, which is worth quite a lot for that business. Well, there's another harsh reality. It's a general purpose technology. It is hype. I want to do AI. But in reality, in practical business life, 80 to 90% of the AI POCs, they don't make it to production. Or at least they fail. They fail because strategic misalignment. We're going to talk about it, how you can solve this. Hidden scaling costs. Some of my technology friends here might be able to help answer those questions. And the cultural resistance. This is where I'm going to focus a lot in the last part of my talk, because this is extremely important. How do you get AI to adopt with people? And I don't do any AI talk without mentioning Professor Malik, because I follow him a lot. In one of his posts recently, he mentioned that these frontier labs are building AI, but they are only good at building technology. They're not building good at use cases that need this technology in your business. And that's where, in my opinion, the real intelligence lies. The intersection of that business and technology, which is where everybody, whether it's technologist or a business person, has to think and align those two things together to really create the value for your enterprise. Next slide, please. Sorry. So the case study we're talking about today is for an organization called Inspired Education Group. They are one of the world's leading education provider. They own about 150 private schools all over the world. And you can look at the scale of the organization. They have about 100K students, more than 10,000 staff, and more than 150K parents to cater to. So what happened around 18 months ago, they are private equity owned. So the board asked them, the CXO team, hey, this shiny thing has come out, generative AI, can you do something about it? And because they felt at that point in time, it was an existential threat. What's his name? Mr. Khan Migo guy, the Khan Academy guy, he was making big TED talks there. Hey, we're going to have this chatbot, that chatbot, education, ed tech gonna rule the world. So that was the starting point, existential threat. And the board was right. But what we did over the next few months, we translated that existential threat into a value creation opportunity. How we did that, we'll come to that. However, can you go to the previous slide, please? There was a challenge. Traditionally, it was a conservative organization because they are a school. They're not a technology company, number one. Secondly, which of course meant that there was very low AI literacy. So these were the challenges we had to overcome to get there. Now, what did we do? Well, I just put the points here. I explained them. Any more questions on these, we can talk over the drinks. Started with strategy definition. It was very important for us to actually align the top team on what the impact of AI is going to be on their business. And more importantly, what Jonathan said, also knowing when to act on that AI opportunity, because we just can't chase everything. We got to prioritize. And that's what we did in the second stage, where we start to identify the use cases. Now, we have a three-stage mantra for that. First, you look within yourself, within your organization, and try to identify what are the use cases that's going to make my business more efficient. Second, you look further down and see, hey, 5 years down the line, where I want to be as an organization. And then see what are the things that I can do with AI that can help me get to that point faster. The third thing, you look around and you see what are the adjacent businesses, which may not be at tech companies, maybe retail business or something else, are doing with AI, which I can do today. They are doing which I can do today with AI. So that's how you create a laundry list of UI use cases. You apply first principles, you prioritize them, and most importantly, make some trade-offs to see that what you need to do and what you don't need to do. Focus of today's talk is done everything, done the technology development, how do you do the execution? Because the key lies here. And once you developed it, how do you make sure that people use it? We'll talk about it. Execution. Well, board said, do it. We made all the strategy, made all the good plans. But how do you keep that momentum going in the team? You do that by doing quick wins, maybe dirty wins, but quick. Make sure that you show results and keep that energy flowing in the organization that, hey, this is something magic. This is something I've not experienced before. And we divided the whole program into speedboats and supertanker. Speedboat were the, I would say, quick and dirty proof of concepts we keep doing so that people keep engaged, people get engaged with the AI. And supertanker was the long-term value creation project that we started. Next slide, please. An example of a speedboat. This was a multi-modal chatbot that we implemented for the schools. It used to be residing on the website of the school to meet and greet all the visitors that are coming to the website. And the purpose of this is much before the agentic AI. The purpose of this lady was to come as close to a human-like experience to a parent when they're coming to the site and asking questions. They used to converse with the person and also encourage the person to share their primary details, also known as lead generation. When we launched it, we saw 25% more leads were generated when we used this kind of a multi-modal chatbot. Now, there were technology problems, some challenges. Response time. We wanted the response time to be as close to human experience, because if it is taking 5 seconds to respond, nobody's going to wait. So what did we do? We did some optimizations using caching, fine-tuning. Second question, hallucination. Somebody asked about hallucination. What we did was we applied, of course, feedback loops for every response. We'll come to that in the Q&A. And the third question challenge we had was cost management. Because if you go to ChatGPT API for everything, the token cost is going to kill us. So we applied a multi-LLM routers here to help us manage the costs. An example of a supertanker project, it was a teacher empowerment platform. Their teachers were spending a lot of time for doing manual work. So we thought, how can we save at least 2 to 3 hours of a teacher every week? And you can imagine they had 10,000 teachers all over the world. It's a huge saving for an organization. So we did 2 things: automated lesson planning. That is, now AI can make a lesson plan for a teacher if they want to teach World War history to year 7 for a group of students who need some special need. The lesson plan will create automatically. I'll show you the demo now. Second one was personalized assessment generation. Inspired has this culture where they conduct a weekly test. Every Monday there's a test conducted for one of the topics of one of the subjects. Teachers are spending a hell lot of time generating an exam, then testing it, checking it, giving the output. We automated everything using AI. We're going to see that. Key challenges quickly: data integration. Data was all over the place. These lesson plans, all these assessments were in teacher's laptop. Getting it all together in a central repository was one of the challenges. And the bigger challenge was human challenge. Teachers were not ready. Like, come on, I'm not going to share this. This is mine. This is my IP. You're going to train to AI, ChatGPT going to take it, and all those kind of things. So we had to overcome those, especially at a global level, because this is a global school. Here's an example of a lesson planner. What it is to do was, let's say, it should create a lesson plan. Let's say there's a lesson plan. The instruction given in the previous thing was to create a Boolean basics lesson plan for a teacher. Teacher can take the plan, edit it, and even do some changes, and then just shoot it to Canvas. If you can go to cycle generator, there's a voice in this one. Mark, it'll be easier. Okay, so the voice is not coming. So this was a cycle generator here, cycle test generator, where you can see one of our engineers doing a demo here. You can create a new test. You can tell the AI system how many questions you want. You want a multiple choice questions or not. You can even give here an instruction about what is the level of difficulty you want to give. If you want to add something extra you want to test on, you can give all those instructions. Made it very simple for our teachers. Boom. And it will just generate a test. Look at the speed at which it's getting generated. It's all just few seconds. There's a test here. Now teachers have the editable rights to actually edit the test if they like to. Well, it's a long video. What I can tell you quickly, what happens that teachers can do everything here. They can shoot it, publish it on Canvas. Canvas is the system that we use for publishing the course material. And then when a student used to take the test, the marking also happens automatically by AI. The output comes back as a feedback, and the feedback is given to the teacher first. So there's a human agency always in between, ensuring that because after all, we are dealing with young minds, so we don't want AI to take full control of things. So there was always a human agency involved. Yeah, can you go to the next so that it's too long? Yeah, so what's the outcome? So imagine where we started from. Data was all over the place. Features not ready to cooperate in the beginning. Tests happening in Brazil and all the way to New Zealand. Nobody had any idea who's performing how, what was the past track record is, because everything was paper-based. So we were able to achieve a centralized platform for the schools, or rather for the organization, which had a common data was all together, comprehensive granular insights about performance of the teachers as well as for the parents, so as the students. Very importantly, now, if you like, we can expose APIs out of it and allow integration for new edtech products to come in. So it's a huge value creation for the future. And of course, we had much more successful learners, and more importantly, much more satisfied parents, who are the ultimate customers for us, because they're going to pay us annually for the fees of the school, fees for the school. So that's the kind of I would say, a flywheel of success that we were able to generate just because we used AI, and we started quite early, 18 months ago. Next, please. Now, my second topic, even more favorite of mine, which is how do you drive adoption? So you got to have a sixth sense, I call it, where you can judge and identify when is the turning point happening in your project. If you're able to do that, you're successful. Otherwise, what's going to happen? Can you go next slide, please? You start a new shiny AI. Everybody's excited. Hey, AI, we're going to try. Maybe some people are skeptic as well, but still. This is nothing, man. This I can do myself. Oh, it's going to take my job. All of those kind of emotions will start to come in, and they will creep in. And the success and unsuccess lies between how deep you let this go. If you are able to take an action on timely, and you change this emotions from negative to positive, is where you're going to make any transformation or any project like these successful. And there are just 3 things that you need to do to make it successful. Next slide, please. Sense. You build an early detection system in your organization to identify what is the emotional energy that is flowing around this initiative, and basis of which is a danger zone or it's actually flowing. So that's the first stage. Second, try to make a sense of what's happening. And you can never make a sense alone. I come from India. I am using an example of an Indian parable here, where it's a famous story there. You put 3 blind men around an elephant and say, hey, what is it? What is it? Everybody will give their own opinion. But when you bring them all together, you try to start making sense of it. And that's what is needed. Once you know that, hey, something is wrong, emotions are bad, you got to start to have your people planted in the right places to understand what's happening, and then start to make sense by having an agile response team which is co-created amongst everybody who's involved in the project, users as well as consumers. Next slide, please. And last is acting. Again, I said 3, but in acting it's got 6. You got to be inspirational leader. You got to have that vision of your project, of your AI transformation, so visionary, so inspirational that people should automatically start to align against it. If they don't, align for it. Otherwise, you're going to miss the bus. Second is care. I've seen a lot of transformational projects. They fail because the leaders think that, oh, I know what I'm doing. I don't care what is happening in the emotions of my team, my users, or my sponsors. So care becomes extremely important. That's why it's second. Build. Of course, you have to build the technology. That's what we saw just now. Speedboats, super tanker. You can choose whatever strategy. It worked for us. We used it. But build a technology solution. Next is empower. Make sure that you have champions in the team, if you're looking at large-scale technology transformations, who are actually becoming your ambassador, who are able to actually go create further ambassadors and empowering the whole of the team and creating that positive environment to basically really embrace what change that's coming towards you. Next comes lead. Of course, you have to lead it. You got to lead it with passion. You got to lead it with purpose. And finally, collaborate, which is you cannot have the 2 sides, which is on the one side you've got the sponsors, board members, on the other side you've got the users who are actually affected because their daily lives are getting affected by this work. And there would be sentiments around, oh, it's going to take away my job. What happens if I don't learn it, so there are two ways. One is that I don't need enough people, they're going to throw me out. Or if I don't learn it, even then they're going to throw me out. So you got to have that compassion in you so that you are able to really bridge that pressure that is coming on from the board versus the actual users going to impact it. How do you balance it out? And for which you need to have the right collaboration in place. So these are the techniques that we used, and we made it successful, and were able to create an actual impact from all the hype that we talk about AI. Yeah, thank you.
So questions for Vikas? Nick?
Thanks very much for the talk. You mentioned briefly that there was some pushback from teachers, and that's one area you maybe have some challenge with adoption. I'd be really interested to hear how big of a problem that was and how you managed to resolve that.
So we had, in the beginning of the project, we had this pushback, which is a very classical pushback happening in many industries. Even in the music industry, same thing is happening. Who owns the content? And once the output gets generated, and if there is a business outcome of that or a value created, who gets the share of that profit and all that? So there were similar problems we had in the European teachers because they were GDPR and the European AI Act was much more stronger. They said the lesson plans and the teaching material which has been produced by teachers actually belongs to them, whereas we knew from the contractual agreement that they had signed with the school, it was belonging to the school or to the Inspired group. So that was the first level of resistance we had to overcome. So that was one. And then coming at the adoption side of things, it was more about what is the impact it will have on our child psychology. Is it going to be the right thing to do or not? So we had to actually pivot, because both the use cases which I showed here on Supertanker, cycle test generator, and the lesson planner, rather the lesson planner first, initially we made it for students. That is, if any child has missed his classes or any child wants to revise certain topic, we are giving them a tool, go and generate your own lesson and learn it. You may say, oh, I'm poor at algebra. Okay, create your own lesson, learn it, inquire it more and more, and it is grounded on the school's information, by the way. Nothing was coming from the internet or the web. Everything was grounded on school's content material. But we actually took that feedback from teachers that kids are too young to be exposed to a technology and we never know where it may go. So we took it back to teachers' side. So that's how we took their opinion, and hence they came along with us in the journey.
Thank you. Deborah.
Thank you. Quick question. Who actually built the software? Like who was, how many teams, and how did you split the work?
The software.
So the software, of course, the IP belongs to Inspired. So there were multiple teams, multiple vendors who were involved, who built it for us, and it was not really like they were external vendors. They were the teams, vendors from whom we contracted engineers and who worked within the Inspired offices, campus, and built it together with us. Yes, please.
Thank you. In one of the slides, you report that you have with the project successful learners. How do you measure that? Because I imagine that the client is what he wanted, more successful learners, but with technology, sometimes you get more interest, more engagement, but no more learning. So how did you measure the successful learners? Thank you.
For us, the successful learners was coming from the fact we were looking at the results that were there in our A-levels and GCSE before and after. And I think the offshoot, the resultant of the whole thing was the successful learners. And it was not because learners were doing anything different. Apart from that, they were still doing the tests. Instead of human-generated, it was an AI-generated test. But the thing happened was that teachers had much more time now to give to learners. especially people who were struggling. As I said, our goal was to save at least 3 hours per week per teacher, and multiply that by 10,000 teachers globally every week. It's a huge saving, and that time was going back to students. So that's how we were able to generate better learners, or smarter output for our students.
Thank you.
Did you have to? Did you use open source models, or did you fine tune those models, or did you have to create your own? Could you comment on that, or?
So since we have multitude of use cases in our super tanker, we use ChatGPT, and so the vendor we use for ChatGPT is also the platinum vendor of ChatGPT in Europe. So they had a very early access to ChatGPT, hence we were quite lucky with that. For the other use case I showed just now, the multimodal chatbot, that was actually built by my team, and we used multiple LLMs, open source as well as ChatGPT, and we did, as I mentioned here, we used a multi-LLM router. So what we did to control the costs for small talks and for certain repetitive questions, we were going to smaller open source language models, but for real-time generation of certain answers, we are going to ChatGPT. So we're doing that sort of cross connection amongst others, different LLMs. So it was a multi-LLM setup.
One more question.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a follow-up to that as well.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, back to me. Thank you.
Yeah, so did you have to navigate a lot of the licensing issues when it comes to using open source models in a commercial environment? Not really.
Okay. We use Mistral AI. I remember that it was like some time ago now. We use Mistral AI. There was nothing like that. There's no. I mean, there was never a discussion as well on this topic, unless it didn't come to me. But there was never a discussion on this topic. Yeah, sure.
Fantastic. So we're at time now, so I just first of all like to thank Vikas for the presentation. So an important news. Domino's bailed on the pizza order drama, but we've got another pizza vendor has been chosen, a little bit like the routing to a different LLM, and the pizzas will be here in 15 minutes. So I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. Our next meeting of Cambridge AI is going to be on March the 20th. And we'll let everybody know. Obviously, by signing up today, you'll hear about it. And I'd just like to end by thanking again our speakers, Vikas and Jonathan, for their presentations tonight.